All right, friends, welcome to Undertaking the Colts. Here we are. I am Ryan Baller. I'm going to open and close this episode here with some sponsors. But I'll tell you what, man, I've had some frustration tonight. Some frustration with Libsyn, some frustration with recording some intros and outros. Not exactly sure what's going on with our hosting software, but yeah, I'm irritated, Lipson, so I'll just put that out there and leave it at that. Let's start off with our sponsors here. Garfield Refining, guys. GarfieldRefining.com, precious metals recycling. If you have a crematory, guys, you know and you understand that there is leftover metals. We go, as humans, go to the doctor. We have surgeries. We have things done. We have procedures. That doesn't go away, especially after cremation. It doesn't go away. It's metal. Friends, we have to be looking at what we're going to do after the fact. What are we going to do with all that? Garfield Refining can help you with that, can help dentists, a lot of different entities, crematories, pawn shops, jewelers, all kinds of different people. They're very much in many different industries. So GarfieldRefining.com is that website, friends. I believe old Axe is over there. I think it's Cameron Axelson. I think I pronounced his name wrong a while back, but good friend of the show. He, back when we went to Washington State, it's been a minute, but we met him over there. I think he's on his ninth master's degree. Or something like that. He's an interesting fellow. Saw him in Springfield with Brian. We had the opportunity to hang out with him, so it was really cool. Really good to see him and honestly just catch up. His family's doing well. The kid's doing well. It's just very, very, very cool. So anyway, next sponsor, Love Always Project, Dean Lambert, 346. He tells the entire story, guys, of the Love Always Project and what he's doing there, how that came about. It's very personal to him, very personal. And he talks about the entire process. But their mission is basically to encourage funeral pre-planning as that that ultimate act of love. And what they mean by that is, having and promoting the discussion of end-of-life issues to provide expert information and encourage people to pre-plan and pay for their funeral as the ultimate act of love for those that you leave behind. It's true, guys. I mean, it's true. No question about it. Within those moments in time, this is something that you have to think about. Pre-planning is, golly, just sitting across the table from somebody. And I know I use that term and say that, and I don't know if it's brash or not, but sitting across the table from a family that's going through the most tragic time in their life, doing this with families that already have this planned out and already have pen to paper is it's much easier. I don't know how else to say it. It's much easier for us, much easier for them, and I think Dean, that's what he's talking about. So 346 is the Dean Lambert episode where he talks about how this originated. So IndianaDonorNetwork.org. Friends, Mackenzie Huey over there, those people over there, those ladies that run that place, unbelievable what they do. We are big fans of the Indiana Donor Network here at Undertaking the Podcast. In fact, go to undertakingthepodcast.com and you can see and find a tab where you can hit and become a donor. Redirects you straight to their website where you can be a donor if that's something that you're interested in. My family, this hits home differently for us. My dad was resuscitated on donated blood. And I am Oneg, which I like to think of myself as the unicorn of the human race. I don't like to brag about that, but I like to say that as often as possible and remind my wife of that as often as possible. But the Indiana Donor Network, friends, my dad was resuscitated on donated blood, and people say, well, it's just donated blood. Yeah, well, it wasn't his. It wasn't his. And that's like that with anything that they deal with over there at the donor network. And I know not every organ procurement organization is equal. Every state is different, but we have a very, very good relationship with ours here in Indiana. So, indianadonornetwork.org. See the show notes, folks. You can find out more about them there. So, all right, guys. So, we're going to talk some football. It's a little bit different. I don't have time to watch, guys. I'm a funeral director. It's my weekend to work right now as I'm putting this out. Fielding calls, yada, yada. So, here we are. I have to listen to things. I podcast a lot, listen to podcasts, listen to a lot of different things. But that's how my entertainment goes. I'm on the move a lot. So this is helpful for me. The questions I do have to Mr. Ursay, Mr. Ballard, who is the general manager, I believe, of the Indianapolis Colts. What are we doing with our quarterback, guys? It's just every year since Peyton, we've just been getting beat down, beat down. And here we are again with questions in the air as to what the future looks like with the Colts. I don't know much about it. All I can say is it's been a while since I can really say I was looking forward and really cheering hardcore, for the Colts. It's tough. You don't see a passion like you did when McAfee was playing, back when those guys were playing. Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison. It was just a different breed back in the day, So, but these guys, Blake and Jordan, they really iron it out. They dig deep into it a little bit. Talk about upcoming games, the future, and it's something different, something I listen to and I'm able to kind of relate with. So, guys, enjoy, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. Undertakingthepodcast.com is that website. Info at undertakingthepodcast.com is that email. Rock and roll. There will be a closer.
Are live again. It has been nearly 3 weeks to the day since our last episode was recorded, and I want to sincerely apologize. It has been way too long. I have missed doing this, and I cannot express how happy I am to be talking into a microphone again. Jordan Brock, Blake Waters, we are back at it again, undertaking the Colts. This is the return episode. Welcome back. Thank you for listening. We, again, profusely apologize, and we've got a lot to catch up on. And JB, I have missed doing this, buddy. How have you been?
Good, man. And like you said, thanks to all the listeners for their patience. Life happens, and a lot has happened in our lives over the last 3 weeks that we kind of had to take care of, and we are back to begrudgingly talk some Colts football the way it's been the last 3 weeks. I don't know that our podcast would have been that all that fun to listen to, anyways.
No, you're absolutely right. It definitely would have been nothing but negativity, which is right up your alley, if I should say so myself, for the last 3 weeks or so. A lot has happened between injuries and on the field performances. And there's been some questionable coaching, staff decisions. I mean, we'll get into that here in a second, but there's going to be a lot to touch up on. And we only got no more than an hour and a half to do this, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get there. But anyway, JB, I wanted to open up this session. You and I have chatted about this. Breaking news came out yesterday. Legendary IU coach Bobby Knight passed away at the age of 83, I do believe. 1971 to 2000, I think, is the years he stretched. Almost 3 decades worth of coaching at IU down there in Bloomington, Indiana. Yeah, you just look at his resume, even at IU alone. It's exactly that. It's legendary. And if you have watched college basketball, whether it be for a season or you have been a dedicated follower to a team in the last 35 years, you know who Bob Knight is and you know his impact on the game and what he really means to college basketball as a whole. And JB, I just want to get your thoughts here before I kind of throw in some of mine. What, in your brief words, just kind of summarize Bobby Knight in your way, who he was as a coach, what he means to not just IU but college basketball as a whole.
Yeah, man, it's a sad day to lose Bob Knight. I mean, an entire generation before us, that's what they grew up on as their college basketball god, and unfortunately for me, I when I really started paying attention to college basketball was literally right around the time that they transitioned from Bob Knight to Mike Davis. And so I really didn't get to see any of the heyday, but I've seen some of the old clips on YouTube, obviously, watched some of the old games, watched the 1987 championship game. My mom was actually an IU student back then, so that's really holds a special place in her heart. And so she's always told me the stories of Bobby Knight back in the day and running into him on campus. And I think at one point she had a class, or one of my uncles maybe had a class that Bobby Knight taught. And it means a lot to the state, whether you're a fan of IU or Purdue or whoever. I mean, just look at the reaction from Matt Painter and all the Purdue folks. I mean, there's nothing but respect for Bobby Knight, and he's a polarizing figure. You can obviously get into some of the other parts of his life that weren't always the greatest when he went on camera and got in front of the media. But that being said, that everybody's got their faults, and he means a ton to the state. So as somebody who grew up right at the end of his reign at IU, and frankly my experience growing up in this state and being a part of Indiana basketball has not been overly pleasant. So I wish sometimes that I could have been, born a couple decades earlier to see the heyday. But yeah, like I said, nothing but respect for him as a coach. And I mean, he really changed the game with his motion offense. So sad for his family, his son Pat and his wife, and his family for his loss. But he will be forever immortalized in both Indiana basketball folklore and both that and college basketball in general.
Yeah, truer words have not been spoken. And I mean, you just go up and down his resume, mainly his big heyday, as everybody knows here in the state of Indiana, was the early mid 70s, so about 1971, 72, all the way up until the early 90s, the 92, 93, those back-to-back heartbreaking losses in the Final Four and Elite Eight. Um, but everybody, and I mean everybody to this day, still talks about the legendary undefeated national champion IU team of 1975, 1976, and to this day is considered one of the best, if not the best, college basketball teams of all time. And there was a clip that came up that I believe my mom shared on Facebook that I came across, and it was a it was like, I think it was 2021 that they did this, so right after the COVID pandemic, that they gathered all the or previous national championship squads, and Bobby Knight came back to Assembly Hall for the first time in a long, long time. And there's a lot of sour feelings I know still out there that you know towards the IU program itself, and um, just how long it took to get Bob Knight back in Bloomington and get him on that court. And my mom and I and several of my family members and other friends are in unison agreement that at any point, I mean, this should have been done 10, 15 years ago, but IU basketball needs to be played on Robert Knight court, if you will, uh, because that's Assembly Hall is the house that Bob Knight built, period, the end. And you just, like I said, you go up and down his resume, and there's some historic losses in there. Don't get me wrong. You can go from the 1973 loss to UCLA to the incredible upsets in '86 and '89 to Cleveland State and Seton Hall, respectively, and then probably the most well-known loss, I will say, is the '92 loss to Duke, and the name that I will refuse to mention that everybody knows, initial CL. So, and of course, the chair. I can't leave this podcast without talking about the chair. And I think it made like
I,
five or six
I,
full revolutions before getting across the court.
I mean, it's funny because you see all the stuff that people are sharing the last day or so, and it's so many good clips. I mean, the one where he brought on his weekly radio show, he brought out what he called the Purdue mascot, and it was really just a mule with a Purdue hat on.
Yes.
I mean that one, and then his speech about burying him upside down so his critics can kiss his ass. I mean, just all time quotes out of him. I mean, every time he was in front of the camera, he knew how to get the most out of it. But no, it's you bring up a lot of good memories for, like I said, people in my parents' generation, your parents' generation. He provided that for the whole state, and even I kind of touched on it earlier with the Purdue side of it. I mean, I came from a family that was basically split down the middle in terms of IU fandom and Purdue fandom. And even my family members who are Purdue fans, for the most part, I do have one uncle who I think he would refer to Bob Knight as Satan, but the rest of them, they all respected the hell out of Bobby Knight and what he did, and it was a two-way street. So growing up in that dynamic, I unfortunately initially had the Purdue fandom in me when I was little, but luckily I made the decision to go to Indiana for college and righted the ship there. So I've really grown to appreciate Bobby Knight over the last several years, and going back and watching some of those old clips. And I mean, there's nothing but fun stuff to watch, man, and it's we're lucky that a lot of it has been able to be translated onto YouTube and other sites to where you can just go watch it very easily. But man, all time quotes and all time actions out of that guy.
Yep, and one that will be remembered for eternity. So, before we get into Colts, there's quite a bit of sports news going on. Baseball season's wrapped up. Congratulations to the Texas Rangers. They beat the Diamondbacks 3-1, 3 games to 1, or 4 games to 1, excuse me. World Series. So that is their first championship in franchise history.
Seems like if you want to be a terrible team that has a massive turnaround very quickly and wins a World Series, you just need to sign Max Scherzer, whether he
Yeah,
plays or not.
I mean,
It's pretty much the
that's
Nationals and
fair.
the Rangers.
I mean, just combine a few designated for assignment guys from other teams with maybe one or two prospects, and then just go spend a bunch of money in free agency. And oh, wait, that sounds like the New York Yankees, but that's neither here nor there. No, but either way, congrats to the Rangers. If anybody on here is a Rangers fan, I'm happy for you. First World Series is always a big one. I know I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, and JB, you're a Cincinnati Reds fan through and through. And you know, both of our teams of recent years. Yours is on more of the upswing than mine, um, but
It's taken long enough.
yeah. Well, I mean, the Red Sox actually just got a new chief baseball officer, so we'll see what happens there. But this is a football podcast. We need to talk about football, specifically Blue Horseshoe Colts football. And oh boy, way too much has happened. We're not going to go into all the games that we missed, but we're more or less, I'm wanting to summarize here tonight with you kind of what has transpired over the last 3 weeks that has just been a big swift kick to the shins, the knee, the hip, pretty much dislocating every bone in your body worth of pain. And it starts off with our young rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson. He is out for the year, got surgery on his shoulder, an AC joint grade 3 sprain, which for those out there that are not medically inclined, if I should say, a grade 3 sprain is a complete tear of the AC joint, and you kind of need that to throw the football. That pretty much gives the shoulder the ability to move and keep its elasticity in terms of its relationship to the collarbone and the rest of the shoulder and so on and so forth. So quarterbacks can play through grade 1 and sometimes grade 2 sprains, but grade 3, yeah, you need surgery. But I believe it was Dr. Elatrache that um, did his surgery. So best orthopedic surgeon in the country, not named Dr. James Andrews. So Richardson should be on the mend, and we should see him healthy for training camp next year, and probably even OTAs this offseason. So no rookie quarterback. That means Minshew mania is wild and free for the rest of the season, and that is about as much of a roller coaster ride as Carson Wentz. I'm just throwing that out there now. And but Minshew's much more likable. That's at least the tolerable portion of this. So I before we get into really big detail, JB, what's your take on the quarterback situation?
Ugh, that's my
Just a
take.
big sigh.
um, yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, it's like I keep texting some of my buddies and saying like, and I mean this in like as an endearing term, not a literal term, but I keep thinking of Minshew as like a schizophrenic. Like it's like one moment it's like some ridiculous pass for like 40 yards that it's like how did he pull that off? And then literally the next play it's like I'm gonna stand in the pocket for 8 seconds and then get murdered from behind and fumble the ball. It's like watching Matt Ryan last year all over again. So I've never been more confused watching a player because you can see that he's talented. He's more talented than your average backup quarterback. But every time it feels like we take a step forward, it's like two steps back. And there's just so many little ticky tack mistakes that come up each week, each of the last 3 weeks. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think we had about zero chance of winning that Jaguars game. So I'm just going to throw that out. But the last 2 weeks, if you go back and look at some of the stupid mistakes that happened, I mean, we very easily could have won both of those games. And it's just frustrating to see inconsistency at the quarterback position yet again for like what seems like I guess the fifth year in a row. Um, to no fault of Anthony Richardson, obviously he just got injured, so it is what it is. But it's frustrating, man, because I think this team is better than its record already, which is weird to say. Um, Especially since Vegas and many others thought we were going to score or we were going to win what 4 games, 5 games. So it's just frustrating to see all these close losses that you can point to like 2 or 3 plays and think, man, we really easily could have won that. So I get that the sentiment amongst most of our fan base at this point is like the sky is falling. We might as well just ride it all the way down into getting Marvin Harrison Jr. or Keon Coleman. But I don't know, man. It's hard for me not to root for the Colts to win every week. And when they've, especially the last 2 weeks, have been right there for the majority of the game, it's frustrating.
Frustrating is probably the lightest word I will use for that. I mean, unlike last year where it got to a point where I think it was by week 7 already, you could pretty much count the Colts as not being competitive. But this year, I mean, we've had a chance outside of maybe a Jacksonville game. We've had a chance in every game. And it's just been critical mistake after critical mistake and critical penalty after critical penalty. And the broken record just keeps getting played over and over and over again. But it's a different tune this year. I mean, at least we're not getting blown out 37-3, or we're not going up to Foxborough and laying the biggest brown egg known to mankind. No, I mean, the Colts are the only NFL team right now putting up 20 points or more a game. Or that, excuse me, they are the only team that has put up 20 points in at least 20 points in every game. And every team by 2 weeks ago couldn't say that other than the Colts, and that's a testament to Shane Steichen and the offensive staff that have completely revamped this offense, even with Gardner Minshew, to maintain productivity. But the biggest shock, actually, do I really want to use shock? Yeah, so we'll just go with surprise because shock's too hard of a word. But the surprise, honestly, is just how bad and inconsistent the defense has been. Like I knew the secondary was going to struggle, but boy, oh boy, injuries have taken a toll. Juju Brents is going to miss the next couple of weeks probably, and we've just got a bunch of young kids back there. I think Jalen Jones and Tony Brown, which don't get me started on Tony Brown between the penalties and just letting uh, Rashid Shaheed blow right by you 3 times. And I'm baffled. I'm baffled and at a loss for words. And unfortunately, now Zaire Franklin is battling an injury, and he may or may not play Sunday. Shaq Leonard, the linebacker formerly known as Darius or the Maniac, still has yet to make a huge impact on a game. And he comes out this week. I saw something. He comes out this week and gripes about how the Colts are using him. Well, Bud, you haven't been healthy in 3 years. We're trying to protect you from yourself. Like, I get that you want to play, and I want to see him play and succeed. I really do, because he's a great human being who's, contributed both on the field and off the field in enormous ways. And I want to see the Maniac be the Maniac again. But right now, it's just number 53, Shaquille Leonard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took the words out of my mouth because as frustrating as the offense can be under Minshew, you're exactly right. They're putting up points. Like scoring 20 in every game in the NFL when nobody else is doing that, I mean that should be enough to get you wins, right? And what we thought we were going to be able to rely on was a consistent defense, and that has absolutely not been the case. And it's funny that you bring it up because I actually saw the Shaq quote earlier today, and I pretty much rolled my eyes. And I was going to send it to you, but then I thought, we're going to record this, so I might just bring it up and talk about it and give us some genuine back and forth on it. But I'm glad you brought it up because I mean, what are we talking about, Shaq? Like, what are we doing? You guys have got torched every game, and you're coming out. I mean, for somebody who has spent his entire career so far with the Colts being like a role model and a leader, to come out and whine about your usage when your defense is getting shredded every game, like go out there and figure it out, man. Make some plays. I think his exact quote included like they're complaining about me not making enough big plays. Well, it's like EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin are making big plays. So if you want more playing time, then make a play. And some I saw some of the comments that on Reddit of people reacting to Shaq's quote, and they're like, "Buddy, you're getting torched every time you're in there on pass coverage. So what do you want them to do?" you know. So I mean that whole aspect has been really frustrating. The injuries have just been killing us. I mean, watching Jalen Jones and Tony Brown last week was, I mean, my eyes were bleeding, and I don't want to be super critical of those guys because they're both young, and I mean, I saw some stuff online of like people were just absolutely ripping Tony Brown to shreds on his like Instagram. It's like don't tweet it or comment on players stuff like that and come after him and talk crap like that. I mean that's so stupid. But we can also recognize that that was probably the worst secondary play that we've seen out of the Colts in quite a long time. So yeah, the last 2 weeks specifically. I mean, the fact that the Colts lost that game to the Browns, and a lot of people want to point to the two penalties. And I get it. It's frustrating. They were both wrong. That being said, 3 quarters of that game was played by a backup quarterback, and your defense still gave up points to them multiple times. So I don't know. I'm out of excuses for the defense. You and I have talked back and forth about Gus Bradley. I don't know how many times now, and the the same old watching the same old thing every week is getting pretty frustrating in terms of the soft zone, giving up the middle of the field, just letting the other team have chunk play after chunk play and work their way down the field. I just don't understand it, and it doesn't seem like it's working very well, obviously, and it's not a sustainable model for the defense. So I don't foresee us getting any rapid changes at this point because the amount of injuries that we have on the defensive side of the ball, they're already kind of on their heels in terms of the secondary, and I saw that they may try to make some moves on the waiver wire or something like that. I mean, they need to do something because the offense can keep scoring 28 to 30 points a game and then continue to lose because our defense cannot stop anything. So it's frustrating to say the least.
Yeah, and to bounce off of the Gus Bradley and the scheme more so, the scheme clearly is not fitting the personnel that we have. That's to me, that's the bottom line. If you look back at the it wasn't a true Tampa 2, but the cover 2 that we ran under Matt Eberflus, we at least were able to stop the ball when it got into a receiver or back or tight end's hand right there. The amount of missed tackles that I've counted over the last few weeks are astronomical. The blown coverages, because the zone responsibilities are so much different in the 3 than it is the cover 2. And we don't have the personnel to play man. We don't have. We've got decent, actually not even decent, really good blitzing personnel. Kenny Moore's a great blitzer from the nickel. EJ Speed has done it several times this year from the Sam linebacker position. I mean, we can generate pressure, and Gus Bradley's stagnant on not calling blitzes. I mean, he's called blitzes, I think, this year at a career high rate, but it's just over 20%. And that's not going to do it with what we have to work with, especially with a secondary being so young and vulnerable that you need to get pressure in under 2.5 seconds in order for this defense to be even remotely effective. Now, of course, granted, we miss Grover Stewart. He decided to eat, I guess, a piece of Mexican chicken or something that had some anabolic substance or whatever it was in it, and so he's out for another few more games. Got a 6-game PED suspension. Um, Buckner's the only force in the interior now. I mean, and then there's injuries on the D line too. So I mean, there's just so many fingers to point, but there's no one clear resolution to get to. And to me, that's the most frustrating part: is there's no one clear way to fix this. But wait, I know of one. Fire Gus. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, ride it out the rest of the season because I don't think anything's going to change. Like you said, it is interesting to your point. I was just looking at some of the statistics on our pressure rating over the course of the last 3 weeks. So on the season, we have a 6.95% sack percentage. And over the last 3 weeks, that has dipped down to 5.88%. But last week, it was 3.33%. So a big part of that, I'm sure, is having Grover in there because he's clogging up the middle, allows the edge rushers to get in there. But when you can't get any pressure or sacks on the quarterback without blitzing, it's just such a disadvantage on the defensive side of the ball. And I think the combination of the injuries in the secondary, the injury to Zaire Franklin, Grover Stewart being out. I mean, it's to defend Gus Bradley a little bit. It is an extremely difficult position to be in because now you're relying on Eric Johnson and David Bryan to really step up and take those snaps that Grover would normally be playing, and it's just you're at a significant disadvantage right off the bat. So that being said, this he's not completely off the hook because we started off with this same mindset when everybody was healthy week 1. You know what I mean? And it wasn't working right off the bat. So we got a couple wins early, but we were still giving up a ton of chunk plays and a lot of yards. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think at the end of the season, and here's the other thing. Shane kind of came in, and I guarantee you he kept Gus Bradley for stability purposes because he's an offensive coach. He's coming in as a first time head coach. Gus Bradley's been a defensive coach and defensive coordinator for 20 to 30 years in the NFL. So, for stability purposes, it made sense to keep Gus Bradley around for this year so that Shane could get his feet under him and figure out, how the contrast of being a head coach versus an offensive coordinator in this league goes. But it's clear it's not working anymore, whether that be a personnel situation between the people that Chris Ballard is bringing in, whether that be a reluctance of Gus Bradley to change his scheme, you know, for the different teams he's playing. I mean, we know it's worked in the past for him at multiple stops, but it's clearly not working here. So either he needs to adapt with the times and adapt to the personnel that we have currently and the guys that we're going to bring in next year, or I think Shane has every right to decide to start over and bring in his own guy and see where it goes. Because, you know, coming into this season and 7, 8 games in now or whatever it is, and we're losing games because of our defense. Like, I mean, compared to last year, it's just so mind boggling. I don't understand it. So it's frustrating, man.
Yeah, and there's not much more that we need to really touch on the defense. It just things need to change and things need to really get shored up because if we really want to take the next step and compete starting next year, then we just have to be better. Period. Dot. The end on defense. And now on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, we've talked about it, but from the 20 points to you know, and before we went on our little hiatus, it seemed like every podcast we're doing something regarding praising Josh Downs and the work that Zach Moss did, and now that Jonathan Taylor's back, he's looking fresh and he looks really good. But for some reason, he just didn't get a carry in the second half last week, and nobody knows why. And Gardner Minshew's while limited in the passing game, he's efficient. I'll say that he is efficient, but he makes dumb mistakes. Like he makes Carson Wentz dumb mistakes. And the offensive line has actually battled quite a few injuries too. It seems like the tackles are just alternating weeks off. Like I don't think Braden Smith is going to play against the Panthers, but we've got Bernard Ryman back. Ryan Kelly's been solid. I think Q's starting to come around a little bit, and then Will Fries has started to dip down a little bit, which was to be expected because this is his first full year of starting. But I mean, overall, I think like O line power ranking wise, we're number 9 in terms of where we are offensive line ranking wise. So I mean, I'm pleased with that. I'm very pleased with that actually. Um, and that, I mean, that's a huge credit to Tony Sperano Jr. and the work that he's done. And I mean, as our offensive line has, when they're healthy and they've played, we offensively we have done really, really well, both in the run and the pass game. Um, but we're missing just that one explosive playmaker. And we've talked about this to no end. And right now, the Colts, as the record stands, are in the number 7 slot for the NFL draft. Now, obviously, we're only just coming up on the halfway point of the season, but I expect that to change. But at the rate that we're going, we're still going to have a top 8 pick, I would guess. So this offseason is going to be massive for not just what we're going to do defensively, but getting that final explosive element on the outside.
Yeah, and to touch on one before I jump into that piece of it. To touch on one thing that you mentioned about Tony Soprano on the offensive line, I have been thoroughly impressed with how there's been some frustrating moments like procedural penalties from Smith when he was in there, and then Q got another holding last week. He's seems like he's getting about one every week, which is kind of out of character for him. So I'm still not convinced he's 100% healthy ever since the early couple weeks when it seems like he tweaked his ankle again. But the development of Bernard Ryman this year, I think Blake Freeland has improved each week that he's been out there. Granted, he's had some pretty brutal mishaps, especially like for the Miles Garrett incident in the end zone, where he just like could not have whiffed anymore on that block. But that was also on the Colts for like, well, how are you not double teaming Miles Garrett when you got a rookie right tackle up against him? So that was a misplay on their part, but overall, I think he's been a pretty good stopgap while Braden Smith's been out. I've been impressed with the way Will Fries has really settled in to that right guard position. So I have very minimal complaints about the offensive line other than stupid penalties that seem to keep popping up. I think I saw last week that we're like the second most penalized team in the NFL. So that's absolutely got to change. And that's something that Shane needs to focus on with this team. But to your point, jumping forward to kind of looking at what do we need here, obviously a big playmaker on the outside for the offense, at the receiver position is critical. That being said, I've kind of come around to the idea of if Marvin Harrison Jr. or Keon Coleman are not feasible for the Colts, depending on how the rest of this season plays out and where we end up and, where those guys end up going in the draft. Because I think those two wide receivers are like generational talents. So I think obviously Caleb Williams will be up there, probably Drake May, but I could very easily see Marvin Harrison Jr. and Keon Coleman going in like the top 7 or 8. So if for some reason the Colts are not in that range and we can't get either of those guys, if I'm the Colts, I think I pivot to an elite young cornerback. Whether that be, I think there's a kid out of Penn State that's got some really good hype around him. Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama. I think he's been playing some safety and some corner. So there's a couple guys floating out there that are really, really good talents at corner. And I think it's very clear that with the decision to trade away Gilly, are very, very thin at corner. I think the future is extremely bright for Juju. I don't know how much longer Kenny's going to be around because they gave him that a contract extension a couple years ago, but Ballard seems to be kind of holding the purse strings a little bit more than he has in the past, especially with some of these guys that are aging a little bit. So all that to say, if those two guys are not there on the wide receiver board, I think I would pivot to corner personally, at least in the first round. But, there's a long time before that. Thankfully, we got a lot more football to play, and who knows how the Colts might turn it around. But yeah, I think that corner position is really becoming distressful very quickly, and I think we got to start looking at maybe that as a priority, even as much as the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I think too that we do need to address edge rusher as well again. Now, all due respect to Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam, they actually have played really well in my eyes. But we do not have an edge rusher that puts absolute fear in an offensive coordinator, a head coach, a left tackle, and a quarterback.
Can can you explain to me why we let Yannick Ngakoue walk? And he signed like a extremely friendly deal with I think it was the Bears is where he
Yeah,
ended up
back
going,
back with
right?
Eberflus.
I genuinely don't understand that because he was extremely good for the Colts. I don't. I guess I don't understand Chris Ballard's mentality of like we have these really productive edge rushers that are not expensive, and he just lets them walk. Like he did the exact same thing
Danico
with
Autry.
Danico Autry. I frankly don't understand like the
I wish
logic
I had an
there.
answer for you. I really do. Because it, I mean,
And I'm not normally super critical of Chris Ballard. I mean, it's very obvious that he is extremely good at identifying talent in the draft, but his free agency mantra has left a lot to, to be desired, in
I
my
agree.
opinion, both on like letting our people walk and also like when is the last time the Colts made a splashy signing in free agency? Like, I truly can't
Don't,
remember. I mean, when we're getting like up in arms excited over signing a kicker for like a 4 year deal,
I
like
was gonna
that's
say, didn't you know Matt
that
Gay
tells
was the
you.
greatest signing we've had in 5 years, man?
I just so it's like I get it. Like there's a lot of value in the draft that we seem to identify that other teams don't, which is great. But at some point, you got to build a team that's got a veteran presence if you want to win and go to the playoffs. So we can't just be starting over from scratch with rookies and 2 and 3 year guys every
Ex
year.
exactly.
And relying on one or two veterans that you've signed to a major deal. I mean, we're all working with the same financial constraints, with the way that the NFL's set up and the salary cap and everything. So it's like, I just don't understand this aversion to like keeping low cost productive guys around.
Oh, it's all about cap management. All about cap management. Uh,
Yeah, it's great when you got 50, 60, $70 million going into the free agency and you're not going to spend
oh,
any
but
of
we pay our
it.
own guys. Okay, says. Well,
Yeah.
I get the Bobby. I get the Okereke letting him walk because we had AJ Speed in the wings. But
Right.
I mean, Stephon Gilmore didn't want to be here
I,
anymore. So he. I mean,
well, and Gilly made sense to let him go. I mean, to trade him, let him go and go to a winning team. Like
yeah,
that made sense. But like the situation at the edge rusher, I mean, he basically shoved all his chips in on Dio Dengbo and Quiddy Pay. And my assessment of those two guys so far in their career is that Quiddy Pay is a nice second best option as an edge rusher, and Dio Dengbo is a depth guy. So now you're left with like a huge void that luckily Samson Ebukam has filled somewhat. I mean, he's made big plays. He hasn't really done anything else outside of make those big plays, but he's filled that void somewhat.
yeah. And then
So
this what past
I
Tuesday or Wednesday we watched San Francisco 49ers steal Chase Young from the Commanders for a third round pick. A third round pick. Like,
that was the funniest part about that was the Bears getting fleeced for Montez Sweat for a second rounder, only to have the 49ers turn around and trade for Chase Young for a third
dude, the Commanders straight up went, "Hey, hold my beer." It was
yeah,
I I've got nothing
what a
for
mess.
that. I
The rich
really
get
they really
richer.
do. They really do. But back to the draft. I mean, if we don't go wide receiver, I completely agree with you in the cornerback route. And I could also see, like I mentioned, the edge rusher for the mere fact that I can see Ballard going after that kid out of UCLA, Laiatu Latu, I believe is his name. He's a Hawaiian or Samoan of origin, so I apologize. My pronunciation is less than ideal with that, but uh, I mean, shoot, I'm looking at this kid's stat right now so far in the 2023 season, he's got 26 tackles, 13 of which are tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, two forced fumbles. And yeah,
It's
and
pretty good.
college is in like what, week 10 now, so that's a sack a week. Now, granted, this is college. Who says this is going to transfer to the NFL? But recently, the top two or three edge rushers that come out of college are recent history, meaning like the last 5 years, are productive as hell. Like, look at the Bosa's, look at Chase Young. Um, I mean, you can name quite a few players, and this kid is as polished as it gets in terms of an edge rusher coming out of college. But other wide receivers that I've thought about too. There's that kid up in Washington, Rome Odunes. He's he's
Yeah,
electric
Adunze.
too. So,
Yeah,
granted, he
he's the kind of guy though. The way I've watched a lot of Washington because obviously IU transfer Michael Penix is the Heisman favorite
right,
right now. So I've watched a lot of Washington, and Adunze is really really good. He kind of reminds me of Chris Olave, where it feels like either home run or nothing else with him. So not that's not to say that he can't get better, but just from what I've seen out of him, I think if I was, and I'm no expert, but if I was kind of grading him out, I would say maybe low first round, high, like second round. Like that would be somebody where if the Colts were able to get a really high end corner in the first round, then you maybe can find some value or trade back into the first round or find a Dunze in the early second round. But that's just the way I'm looking at it. I don't know what his grade or his projection is right now on Mel Kiper or
right.
any of that stuff. But that's just from what I've seen, from when I've watched them. I just think there's such a clear two. There's Marvin Harrison Jr., Keon Coleman, and then after that, I would say it goes into another tier, which would probably be Malik Neighbors at LSU, and then Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State if he comes out of the draft. Um, there's a lot of guys out there, but the numbers of wide receivers that are talented versus I feel like the corners to me when I was looking it up look a little bit more thin, so it may make more sense to take. I don't know. We'll see what they
Yeah,
do, but
and again, there's also a lot of defensive guys that I could see falling in the draft that we could snag early day two. Guys like Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, or Chop Robinson out of Penn State, and let's see who else am I gotta think. There's that edge rusher out of Alabama. Um, Shoot, what is his name?
I don't watch enough of the SEC to tell you.
I mean, that's completely fair.
All I know is Kool Aid McKinstry because
Dallas
how do you
Turner.
forget that
That's it.
name?
Dallas Turner.
But Dallas Turner.
That dude's
Okay,
a
I have heard
freak
the
of
name.
nature in terms of his size. Dude, the kid's like 6'6" or something like that, and just has ungodly quickness off the edge. Um, but no, like there's so many prospects. Oh, that corner you're talking out of Penn State, I just thought of his name, Kalen King, KK. Now that
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. Well, so let me ask you this, since we're on the topic of the draft. My perspective is it's more difficult to source wide receivers and top end corners in free agency than it is edge rushers. So my perspective would be I would go for those two over an edge rusher because I feel like it's easier to fill that void in a free agency where somebody like a or I guess I can't say that anymore. Commanders, somebody like that team where they're trying to offload salary
hmm
cap, right? You let somebody walk, and then I just feel like it's easier to maybe fill that void in free agency. So that would be my logic there. But I mean, I agree with you. It's definitely a position to address. But what are your thoughts
so
there? Do you agree with that
to
or?
an extent, and here's why. So I'm going to kind of go off of like the past decade, and I'm going to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers real fast. They have a track record, and I don't know how they do it, and no other team has replicated their success. not even close. But Pittsburgh has yoinked wide receivers out of the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh round and turned them into stars. And me personally, with the way that today's game goes, you can forego drafting a wide receiver early to get them in the mid to late rounds for that uber cheap rookie contract deal. And if they pop, they pop. If not, okay, cool. There's no harm, no foul in cutting ties and trying again next year. Edge rusher takes time, and that's kind of why I was so befuddled at Montez Sweat and Chase Young just being given away, basically. Because edge rushers coming in out of college, if you don't get one of the top two or three elite guys in the first round or early first round, good luck. You're basically blindly throwing darts at a dartboard because most defensive ends, when they come out, they have anywhere from 1 to 4 years of a window to harness their potential. Because in college, these star or high sack guys usually can rely on a couple of different skills and maybe 2 to 3 pass rush moves, and that's it. Whereas, I followed Robert Mathis for several years, and he coaches defensive linemen here at Grand Park and Westfield at his own private academy. And not just kids, but like high school, college, D3 up to the D1 FBS level, and even pros and semi-pros. Like everyone from around the football world comes to him to learn pass rush moves. And the reason being is you need a full arsenal to be highly successful in this league. Now, granted, there's a few exceptions. Whereas, you look, I think it's Nick Bosa that has the chop move, and then Reggie White's pad and push pull, Dwight Freeney's spin move, Robert Mathis low dip to the ground. Those legendary pass rushers all perfected one move that they couldn't be blocked. But they also had a full arsenal of 12 to 15 more pass rush moves they pulled out every once in a while just to give a different look and make them unpredictable. And so a defensive end coming out, or edge rusher, whatever you want to label them, coming out of college, they may have perfected or have a favorite move, but they haven't truly mastered that move plus an arsenal. They haven't even developed an arsenal, if I'm being honest. And so that's why we're just now starting to see more consistent flashes from guys like Ebukam and Pay, because they are in their third and fourth year respectively. And now that they have much more games under their belt, they faced an echelon of offensive tackles. I can keep babbling about this, but to me, edge rusher, if they are available on the market, go get them. And just pay your price. One midday pick or mid second day pick. Come on. Like, are you kidding me? For a
Well,
kid
yeah,
that's 24 years old.
especially with especially with how the Colts accumulate draft picks and flip them around and stuff. I mean, I agree.
It's frustrating. And you can kind of say the same thing about corner, because if you don't get the top, 4 to 6 guys, then you've got a developmental project who has, I compare it to a 5-tool baseball player. You know, Obviously you want the perfect baseball player can hit for power, run, field, throw. Um, but you translate that to a corner, you want them to be able to do bump and run man. You want them to be able to flip their hips and get into a zone. You want them to be able to break on a ball and be able to read a receiver's hips and his actions to break on a route and anticipate and all this other jazz. That it's like, okay, well, again, if you're not getting the top 4 to 6 elite guys, then you're going to get a guy who maybe has two, at most three of the 5 or 6 items that you really need to have a good starting NFL cornerback. And it's really, really difficult to develop those guys.
Yep, I agree completely.
Man, that was a lot of rambling.
Well, we've got 3 weeks to catch up on our thoughts, and frankly, spending a large chunk of our segment talking about the draft doesn't come out of
This is
nowhere. I
fair.
mean, the way that we've looked, the way that we've looked the last 3 weeks. I mean, would people rather us talk about how horrible this team has looked at
I
times?
mean, we don't want to be completely negative and just poop on the rest of the season because I mean, there's still 9 games left to go, and we get to see old pal
Yeah,
Frank Reich this coming weekend in Carolina, who finally just got his first win.
yeah. I mean, if there was ever a game that, frankly, the Colts should absolutely win this season, it would be this one. The way that the Panthers have looked
Yeah, but
so
they got their
far.
first win last weekend. Momentum. And of course, Frank's going to have a wee bit of extra. He's not going to ever publicly say it or show any emotion about it because the dude's as stoic as an oak tree. But, I mean, he wants to beat the Colts.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. But for some reason, so far in the well, let me back up here a little bit. Other than the Jaguars road game, so far the Colts have seemed to look better on the road for the most part than they have at home. So it's going to be interesting to see which team shows up because I think I saw some stat earlier this week that the Colts have lost like 8 out of their last 9 home
Hmm.
games or something. I think I literally saw the one I was at the Titans game. So maybe I'm gonna have to start going to more home
Hey,
games.
whatever you got to do it.
And also while we're pointing out stats here, we haven't podcasted in 3 weeks and there's been 3 losses. So
Well,
we're
if you
playing the odds here. We
if you
might get a
put
win
it
this
that
weekend.
way, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let it ride. But no, I really just want to see. I want to see improvements. I'm tired of seeing the same, the rinse and repeat crap every week. That it's the same plagues from that we rambled on earlier in our recording here, from the penalties to the missed assignments to drops. Even I mean, we've had a couple crucial drops over the last few weeks. Um,
I will say though, overall, I've been much happier with the wide receiver unit as a whole, even though that seems kind of counterintuitive because we've lost 3 games in a row. But we seem to be getting more consistency and cohesion out of that unit in terms of like each guy's figuring out really what they're, other than Michael Pittman, which he kind of had a little bit of the same as Shaq, where he was like had one game where he didn't get a bunch of targets and then started throwing a fit in the media, which I don't love. But
I can defend Pittman
Josh,
here. Pittman came through and clarified, and here's where and this is not, now you're going to get me going, because this is where you can kind of get a peek into the Colts organization and how they feel about certain players. So after Michael Pittman made his comments, he immediately followed it up the next day at practice, like, "Hey, this is where I'm coming from. I'm a competitive guy. I want to, be able to do X, Y, Z." Chris Ballard and other coaches came out publicly and said, "Yeah, I'd rather have somebody who's a dog like that and demanding excellence than somebody who's just going to let it slide." Turn around to the recent events of the last 24 hours. Shaq makes his comments. It is currently radio silent.
that's fair. That's a fair point. Because I do recall Pittman, the dialogue kind of shifted and he clarified his comments. But that's a good point. I mean, but I mean, I've been impressed with how Pittman and Downs have really like started to find this like cohesive flow, I guess. I've seen them line up on the same side quite a bit. Alec Pierce has made some plays the
Hey, you
last
were
couple
able to
weeks,
mention
so
his name without
uh,
getting hostile. Look at you.
I know. I've been impressed. He made a couple good catches last week against the Saints, and I think again, it's maybe a level of like learning a new offense, right? This is a new offense for all three of them, and Pierce so far in 2 years has had four different quarterbacks throw to him. So as frustrated as I've gotten with him earlier in the year, it's like to take a step back over these last 3 weeks and realize like, okay, I'm a fan at heart, and I want to see the team win, and I'm getting frustrated at these guys, but I need to like put my like objective cap on here and realize that like this team is really just not that great right now, and they're finding their way under a new coach. So I just wanted to make mention of the wide receiver specifically because I have been pretty impressed with them over the last few weeks. I think it's been more of like an inconsistent
Yeah,
throwing partner on the other end of it with Minshew, which you just never know what you're
this
going
is
to get out of him.
accurate. But I will say this too, switching gears ever so slightly. Um, we have an established tight end one, and his name is Drew Ogletree.
Yep, I think we're going to save some money with Big
I
Mo, unfortunately,
that
taking
that
a
and that one
hike.
hurts because I love Mo. Has been an extremely humble, quiet, hardworking human being who has done all of the dirty work in the trenches, caught a few big passes here and there, and yeah, I can't be more thankful for Mo Alley Cox. I mean, uh, coming out of Virginia
Yeah,
Commonwealth as a basketball player, never played football, basically was a Colts developmental project for the better part of 3 years behind Jack Doyle, and over the last few seasons has really emerged and become a trustworthy offensive weapon, both on the offensive line, blocking for the run game, and then crucial touchdown and third down conversion catches. But unfortunately, I believe this is 100% Mo Alley Cox's last season, and I'm gonna say the same thing at the end of the season. But I wish him well in his future endeavors. So I'm gonna, whatever playing time he gets over the next 9 games, it'll be. I'll root for him, and hopefully he can get a touchdown or two. But farewell, an early farewell already to Mo Alley because Drew Ogletree has established himself 100% as tight end one. His blocking has increased week after week. He's made big catches. He's athletic as all get out, much faster than Mo Alley, um, and more sure hands. So I
yeah,
mean, bottom line
yeah.
there.
2 points to touch on what you said. I'm glad you brought up Mo's background. That reminds me to mention to our listeners out there a game that my buddy and I came up with was every time the broadcast mentions that Mo Alley Cox played basketball at VCU, you take a shot. So
I like it.
we all have to take one for Blake mentioning it here. But no, I just think it's pretty funny because like every week it's like four
It really
times
is
they
too.
talk about and playing that, which it is cool. It's an awesome feat. But yeah, it's like over the last what like 6 years he's been there. It's it's a little bit tired
Yeah,
at this point. But um,
the whole him playing basketball at VCU is all that is talked about, but what a lot of people really don't know is what he actually went through at the Colts facility the first 3 seasons that um, he was part of our organization and learning how to play football. I mean, the stuff that a
right,
lot of us did playing Pop Warner football or flag football, whatever we did growing up. I mean, you learn the basics at a young age and you just perfect your craft as you keep getting older. But the dude literally just had nothing but street football experience, backyard football. And it's like, all right, just introducing this kid fresh out of college who played collegiate basketball. All right, well, hey, here's a helmet and shoulder pads, and this is the game of football. It's not what you think. Here's a bunch of X's and O's with lines. Learn this. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
yeah. No, I mean, it's absolutely impressive what he's been able to do, and to our, what we've been saying here, like it's nothing but the best for him. I'm sure he'll land on his feet at another team. It's just a matter of Drew Ogletree has come out of nowhere in terms of like last year. I mean, obviously a lot of Colts media identified pretty early on that he was extremely talented in training camp last year before he got injured. But I think the step that he's been able to take this year, not only as a threat to make plays down the field in the passing game, but his ability to consistently block well just really kind of fills that void. And I mean, frankly, we came into this season with five tight ends, and to be honest with you, at the way that things are going, as much as I've been a Kylan Granson guy, I wouldn't be surprised if next year our tight end room was Will Mallory, Drew Ogletree, and Jelani Woods, because I think Jelani Woods is just too much of a threat in the passing game not to keep around, despite the fact that we haven't been able to see him yet this year. But Granson really, with his size as a tight end, he's kind of just like a tweener between wide receiver and tight end, and he just I keep waiting for him like every week to just have like a huge breakout game, and it just hasn't happened really. I mean, he's made some really good plays this year, but then he got injured, and I just with the size of Pittman and Pierce, does it make sense to have a small tight end that's more of like a lumbering wide receiver? So I've thought about that over the last couple of weeks, and especially with the speed of Will Mallory for his size, he is a very much a passing threat down the field as well. So if we can really get Jelani Woods coached up on blocking schemes and improve there, I think we'll be able to see a tight end room next year that would be Drew Ogletree, Jelani Woods, and
Yeah,
Will
and
Mallory.
I'm 100% on board with that. And I want to bring up an example of what that can look like at its peak. For those of you that remember the mid early 2010s Patriots, the dual tight end threat of Rob Gronkowski in his prime and rest, rest in, I don't know how you want to say it, but rest well, I guess is the best I can say, to Aaron Hernandez. Uh, I mean, for those of you that know the backstory, it is
Sorry,
where.
I shouldn't be laughing, but
No, I get it. But I mean, Aaron Hernandez, it is a tragic story. It really is. But in a football sense, when he was on the field playing, he and Rob Gronkowski were un, undefendable, absolutely undefendable. Uh, Gronk being the 6'6", 6'7" monstrosity that he is, and Aaron Hernandez kind of being a Kylan Granson type, but much larger. I think Aaron Hernandez stood 6'5", 245 or something like that, and Gronk was 6'7", 260. Both in their prime playing days, but those tight ends were just unbelievable to guard. You would double team one, and Brady would dump it off to the other, or you somehow found a way to guard both tight ends, and there goes Wes Welker somewhere else. It was the biggest headache on planet Earth. I don't know how the Giants beat them twice in the Super Bowl, but yeah, those were some incredible. And I'm with you there. I think that combination of Ogletree and Jelani Woods can get really nasty with a little Will Mallory sprinkled in somewhere. And we're also beginning to see this more in the NFL, more of the tight end going to like an H-back, fullback type of role, to where they go back in the
right.
pistol or the shotgun with the quarterback, and you can do all sorts of fun trickery with them. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the roster reconfigures itself and how Ballard tweaks it, and how Shane Steichen now is going to have a full off season of input, and just how this all plays out going into the 2024 season. But we still have 9 games left, so I'm not going to go too far into that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and just to put a bow on that part, I mean it's going to be interesting to say the least to see. I feel like our offensive line is probably pretty well set for the time being. But I would not be surprised in the slightest to see a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball and, within the maybe not necessarily the receiving core, but tight end specifically. So definitely going to be
Yep,
interesting.
I agree with you there. Um, I mean, that's pretty much it, all I've got right now. I mean, again, it's been three
You,
weeks since
yeah,
we've chatted about the Colts, and I mean, keeping it as general as
to
possible,
be
like that's pretty much it.
to to be transparent with the listeners here, Blake and I talked a little bit before this episode, and frankly, to be honest with you, we did not do a whole lot of scouting of the Panthers game this weekend. We really felt like we had a lot to catch up on from the last 3 weeks or so that we unfortunately missed. So here's what I can tell you about the Panthers. They're 1-6. I have like four of their guys on my dynasty fantasy team, and they all stink. So we should have a pretty good chance this
You're
weekend.
really gonna go off of that?
I did my I did my research on the important thing here though, and our referee crew this weekend is Bill Vinovich's crew. And in the duration of his time as a head referee, the Colts are 8-8 in games that he has refereed in. So we got a 50-50 shot,
Good,
just like
good.
usual.
Um, yeah, no, I don't have too much on the Panthers other than, Miles Sanders was supposed to be their lead tailback or their feature back. He hasn't been anywhere near. He's had injuries and just not productive. And then Chuba Hubbard, I mean, he's a backup running back. Their most consistent receivers, Adam Thielen, at age 34, I believe he is now. They got a young kid. They got a young kid or two that they really need to pop. But at this rate and the offense that they're running, yeah, Jonathan
Jonathan
Mingo,
Mingo,
thank you. Uh,
he's on my he's one of my
yeah,
guys.
again, need to pop. Um, but Carolina is just completely rebuilding. Probably they are the lowest team in the NFL right now in terms of record and in terms of talent on the team. You say what you want about Bryce Young. I'm not a fan. Um, I just,
I feel a little bit bad for
yeah,
Frank,
for
to be honest, because it's become very clear that he wanted C.J. Stroud, and he went from one situation of maybe an owner getting a little bit too involved to just yet another
yeah,
one.
Frank. We met. I think we talked about this on the last podcast that we did. Frank has just gone from one poop stick to another. It's unfortunate because Frank's an incredible human being and he's actually a good coach. If he has what he desires. I mean, we saw it in 2018 with Andrew Luck.
Yeah, yeah, and I think he'll do good things in Carolina. I just think the unfortunate side of it is, they're in a rebuild. So he went from one rebuild with the Colts where it was a unanticipated rebuild with Andrew Luck retiring to another unfortunate rebuild situation with Carolina. So hopefully they can get the ship righted with Bryce Young, but ideally they'll hold off another week before they get that going and let us squeak a win
Yep.
out here.
I do have the Colts winning this game 31-23.
I like that. That's a good number. I'm gonna go 34-31 Colts.
Okay. Very good.
I think it'll be it's which means it'll almost assuredly be like 21-7.
I'm not going to argue with you because, I mean, right now, the Colts are favored. Um, I can't remember the last time I saw Colts being favored. That's somewhat shocking. I mean, we're going to have some injuries. Right now, there's actually several questionable Colts. Granson, Odangbo, Zaire Franklin, Josh Downs are all questionable. I fully expect Downs and Franklin to play. Granson, probably not. And then Odengwo's a coin toss. Juju Brents is doubtful. He probably won't play. The Panthers are missing several players as well. DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault at wide receiver both have not played too much this year. They're missing their stud cornerback J.C. Horn, he is the son of former Saints wide receiver Joe Horn. Fun fact of the day, very productive receiver. But yeah, right now for
I'm
go
a
ahead.
I'm a little bit surprised that the over is only set at
I've got it
44.
at 43 and a half right now.
I think I might yeah, on DraftKings it's 44. I might be wagering on the over. The spread I see is 2.5. So yeah, I think the
Yeah,
Colts can cover
I
that.
would mash the Colts covering and the over for this game just because both defenses are flaming dumpsters and the Colts offense is pretty much guaranteed to put up 20 over the last few games. So I would bank on the Colts putting up at least 27. So that would put the Panthers only needing 17 points, which the Colts have given up quite a bit more than that. So the over would definitely be a home run of a hit.
I'm gonna make one more bold
Oh
proclamation for
no.
this game. Alec Pierce gets his first touchdown of the season.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Look at you getting on that bandwagon.
Ordering a jersey. I solemnly swear, if he scores a touchdown this weekend, I will
Photo
order a
proof on
jersey.
social media too.
Will do.
That's gonna be if this happens, this is going to be you in an Alec Pierce jersey will be our podcast cover for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I fully expect it's going to be like a 31-7 Panthers game. Panthers win. The Colts only touchdown is Alec Pierce. I don't hit the over, and I got to order a $200 jersey of
I
Alec
oh
Pierce.
my gosh, I already feel the salt level spewing out of you next week.
uh, we'll see. I'll be happy for him if he gets
Yeah,
that.
but a blowout loss would to the Panthers would send you into a frenzy.
Yeah, I might just see if I can get like a 2-for-1 deal. If we lose to the Panthers, I might just order a Marvin Harrison Jr. jersey while I'm at it.
Ooh, just custom make it. Gotta
Yeah.
get Indiana Knights though. That black and blue, even though people were dogging on it, saying like, "Oh, look, it's the Duke Blue Devils." Nah, I like that. Those are nice uniforms.
Uh, I thought they were fine. But I still think my favorite alternate of the Colts is the one that they wore 2 years, the color rush they wore 2 years
The blue
ago
on
against the
blue.
Jets on Thursday Night Football. The blue on blue. I mean, the royal blue on blue
That
was
was
oh,
that was pretty.
chef's kiss.
But I mean, that's no design change. That's just your standard Colts royal blue jersey with royal blue pants. Like this was a complete design change
Yeah, I don't know how I like incorporating the black in there. I almost wish if it was
for
I
the
don't
love.
know.
What do you want to
Maybe
see? What do they need to do for you?
maybe I just more white
More
maybe. I don't
white?
know. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't like the black and blue just it
Okay, fine. Here's our Indiana
didn't do it for me.
daytime,
The
our
Colts.
cheerful chipper daytime jerseys, white on white.
That's kind of how our defense is playing right now, so we might as well get it
I
going for
despise you in every aspect.
them. That's why we're good podcasting
This is valid.
partners.
But all right, it has been an absolute pleasure. Hour and 16 minutes, almost an hour and 17 minutes later. I'm so happy to be back doing this. So, JB, it's been a pleasure yet again. To everybody listening to this, thank you for coming back. And again, one final apology. Life happens. I've said it before many of times. You improvise, adapt, overcome, and you got to do what you can and take care of what matters first. And that's the things that are close to you, family, friends, making sure that your circle is okay because everybody struggles at some point, and just make sure you pick each other up. And yeah, let's hopefully some Colts football can turn around, so that way it can add another positive
Yeah.
back to the life circle.
And we'll be back at you folks on Sunday night. Well, you'll probably see it on Monday, but we're going to record on Sunday night. Hopefully after a
Yes,
Colts
find
victory.
and get some good vibes going. So, all right. Well,
Yep.
this is Blake Waters with JB signing off. We'll catch y'all on the next one.
All right, friends. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoyed something a little bit different, talking a little bit of football, a little bit of a change up, an additive to what we add to not only a funeral podcast, but a podcast of storytelling and a podcast of many different things. So, Blake, Jordan, we appreciate it. We know the season's not forever. It's only a short time, so we appreciate what you're doing and some of the stuff you're throwing out. What I will say is we also appreciate the Love Always Project. Dean Lambert, episode 346. He talks about the origination of this. The Love Always Project encourages and promotes discussion about end-of-life issues and providing expert information and encouraging people to pre-plan and pay for their funerals. They look at that as the ultimate act of love. So lovealwaysproject.org. Friends, you can find them in the show notes as well, the website. But Dean Lambert, friend of the show and sponsor. Garfield Refining. Friends, old Axelson, old Axe is what we called him. He's over there. We met him in, I believe it was Washington State. It would have been their convention. It's been a few years ago. But we had the opportunity to go out there. We met him there. I'm not sure if he was with Garfield Refining at the time, but he is now. We saw him out at Springfield for that the Illinois State Convention over there. That was great. It was a great time. Awesome venue, awesome place. Absolute great time. So we got to see him over there. I think he's on his 9th master's degree as of right now. I think it's interesting how people, when they get one master's degree, it's just not enough. Just not enough. I need about 9 more. So luckily I have an associate's and feel accomplished. So moving on from that, garfieldrefining.com. Give old Axe a call over there. He'll be able to, old Axe a call over there. He's extremely helpful, good people. And like I said, we had the chance to get to know him, Brian and I, in Washington State. And it was cool. Very, very, very cool. Friends, I'm going to hit you up with this. The Donor Network, IndianaDonorNetwork.org. Mackenzie Huey over there is the funeral director liaison. What a job, friends. I tell you, jealous. She's doing some good work over there, though. All the ladies over there that run that place are doing great work. This hits home for me differently than most. And one, because I've been put in the position where it was my father. It was my loved one. People always say it's important if it is it was. It was my dad. My dad was resuscitated on donated blood. And as I like to always point out, that I am the unicorn, O negative, of the human race. It just hits differently for us in our family. We got a few more months. We had about 9 months with my father because of donated blood, and he had a really, really tragic thing occur during emergency surgery. That we were able to fix him with this. So IndianaDonorNetwork.org has a special place in my heart because it's relative to my family and it's relative to our story. It's relative to the Ballard story, the Ballard and Sons Funeral Home story, because everything that happened there occurred there, or everything that happened occurred there. So yeah, boy, got deep and emotional in that one. I apologize. IndianaDonorNetwork.org. As you can see, it still hits home, guys. I think it always will, but we very much appreciate those ladies and those folks over there. So, friends, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. Undertakingthepodcast.com is that website. Info@undertakingthepodcast.com is the email. As always, guys, rock and roll.